My grandmother passed me the envelope under the table between the sweet potato casserole and the dinner rolls. Nobody saw it, not my mother, who was refereeing an argument between my aunt and uncle about Thanksgiving travel plans. Not my father, who was trying to convince my little brother to stop feeding scraps to the dog under the table. Not my husband Caleb, who was helping my grandfather carry dishes back to the kitchen. The whole family was loud and alive and completely wrapped up in each other. The way families are on a Sunday when the food is warm and the opinions are warmer. And right in the middle of all that noise, my grandmother leaned toward me and pressed a thick envelope into my palm under the tablecloth. Her fingers were trembling. Eleanor Voss's fingers did not tremble. This was a woman who had raised 4 children mostly on her own while my grandfather worked double shifts at the shipyard. She had held my hand through stitches in the ER when I was 7 without flinching once. She had buried her youngest son. She had survived a stroke in 2016 and been back in her garden within 6 weeks. Her hands were the steadiest things I had ever known. I had never, in 31 years of knowing this woman, seen her fingers shake. "Don't open this here," she whispered. Her voice was low, barely reaching me through the noise of the table. Below the sound of my aunt complaining about airport delays. Below the scrape of silverware and the laughter of my nieces chasing each other around the living room. Below the comfortable, beautiful chaos of a Sunday dinner in the Voss family home in Providence, Rhode Island. "Grandma, what? Go home, pack a bag." She leaned closer. She smelled like lavender and the vanilla extract she always dabbed on her wrists instead of perfume and the rosewater she'd used on her skin every single night since 1967. But underneath those familiar smells was something I had never detected on my grandmother before. Fear, not the quiet worry of a woman getting older, something colder, sharper, the kind that lives in the body, not the mind. "They've been watching the house," she said. "You have 24 hours, maybe less." Then she leaned back, picked up her glass of sweet tea, and took a slow sip like nothing had happened. She looked across the table at my grandfather and said, "Hank, tell Wade's father that story about the fishing trip, the one with the pelican." The table erupted in laughter. My grandfather launched into the story. The dinner continued, and I sat there with an envelope in my lap and my grandmother's words carving through every thought in my head. "They've been watching the house. You have 24 hours. I looked at her face. She was smiling at my grandfather, warm and easy, being Eleanor Voss, the 77-year-old retired school teacher who grew tomatoes and sent birthday cards 3 days early and made the best peach cobbler in Rhode Island. But her eyes, when they found mine for just 1 second across the table, told a completely different story. There was something in them I had never seen before. Not sadness, not worry, something older than both of those things, something that looked like it had been sealed behind glass for a very long time and had finally, quietly cracked. She was terrified. I put the envelope inside my cardigan pocket. I finished my cobbler. I kissed my grandmother, hugged my grandfather, collected my daughter Marisol from the playroom where she'd fallen asleep on the floor with her cousins, and walked out to our car with Caleb beside me and my grandmother's secret pressing against my ribs like something alive. The drive from Providence to Warwick is barely 20 minutes. That night it felt like 2 hours. "You're quiet," Caleb said. He was driving, one hand on the wheel, the easy posture of a man who had no idea what was folded up inside my sweater. "Just tired." "You're not tired. You went somewhere else the moment your grandmother leaned over to you. I watched it happen." He glanced at me. "What did she give you?" I had married an observant man. Most days I loved that about him. "I'll tell you when we get home." "Tell me now." "When we get home, Caleb, please." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked in the rearview mirror at Marisol, 4 years old and completely unconscious, her mouth open, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. "Okay," he said quietly, "when we get home." We pulled into our driveway on Crescent Street at 7:11 p.m. I carried Marisol upstairs and laid her in her bed and stood there for a moment, just watching her breathe. 4 years old, 32 lb, the entire weight of my world compressed into a tiny person who still reached for my hand in parking lots. She had Caleb's eyelashes and my stubbornness and a laugh that could reset any day that had gone wrong. Whatever was in that envelope, whatever my grandmother was afraid of, this little girl was the reason I needed to understand it completely. I went downstairs. Caleb was at the kitchen table, 2 glasses of water, the overhead light on. He was sitting the way he sat when he understood something serious was about to happen, still, patient, fully present. "Show me," he said. I sat across from him, pulled out the envelope, opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. 7 pages. My grandmother's careful, looping cursive, the same handwriting that had graded thousands of student papers and written out recipe cards and signed every birthday card with "All my love, Grandma Ellie," for as long as I could remember. A small brass key, the kind used for safety deposit boxes, a USB drive, black, unlabeled, and a business card for someone named Special Agent Diane Correa, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Providence Field Office. I picked up the letter. Caleb leaned forward. I read it out loud because whatever this was, we were already in it together. "Nora, if you're reading this, it means I've run out of time to tell you in person what I should have told you years ago. I'm sorry, I'm so deeply sorry, but right now sorry isn't enough and it isn't what matters. What matters is that you understand what's happening and that you move quickly." In 1971, I was 26 years old. I was working as a bookkeeper for a textile company on Atwells Avenue in Providence. The owner, a man named Sal Mancini, had hired me through a temp agency. I was good with numbers. I needed the work. I didn't ask many questions. After 8 months on the job, I realized the books I was keeping didn't add up the way legitimate books add up. The cash flows made no sense for a company that size. I had started to understand slowly what I was actually recording. Before I could decide what to do with that knowledge, 2 federal agents approached me in the parking garage where I walked to my car every evening. They had been watching the company for over a year. They told me they knew what I had seen. They told me I had a choice: cooperate or be charged as a knowing participant. I cooperated, and then I kept cooperating for 11 years. I stopped reading, set the letter down, looked at Caleb. His face was very still. "Your grandmother," he said slowly, "was an FBI informant. That's what this says. Alina, the woman who brings us tomatoes from her garden every August. Keep listening." I kept reading. From 1971 to 1982, I worked as a confidential informant for the FBI. My handler was an agent named Robert Finch. I continued my work as a bookkeeper, moved between several businesses connected to the Mancini organization, and reported everything I saw and heard to Robert. I was invisible in the way that women in offices are often invisible. Nobody worries about the woman with the ledger. Nobody lowers their voice when the bookkeeper walks through. In 1982, the FBI made its move. Sal Mancini and 19 members of his organization were indicted on federal racketeering, extortion, and money laundering charges. Mancini died in federal custody in 1991. His operation was dismantled. I was given a sealed commendation, a modest pension supplement I could never explain to anyone, and a promise that my identity would remain protected forever. For 43 years, that promise held. Last month, it broke. I turned the page. My hands weren't steady. Mancini's daughter, a woman named Carla Mancini Ruiz, has spent years quietly trying to identify who inside her father's organization fed information to the FBI. A journalist's FOIA request last year unearthed partially redacted documents from the original case. One document referenced a female bookkeeper as the primary source. Carla Mancini Ruiz is 61 years old. She is not a violent person, but she has money, and money buys people who are. Robert Finch, my old handler, is 84 years old and still sharp. He called me 10 days ago. He told me that someone has been making inquiries, that a private investigator connected to Carla had been spotted asking questions in Providence, that my name had likely surfaced. He told me to move. I told him I needed a few more days. I needed to get this letter in. Nora, the key in this envelope opens a safety deposit box at Citizens Bank on Waybassett Street. Inside is enough money to keep you, Caleb, and Marisol safe until this is resolved. The USB drive holds digital copies of Robert's original handler reports, every meeting, every piece of information I provided. Robert gave them to me years ago as a safeguard. If anything happens to me, those files prove everything. The business card is for Agent Diane Correa at the FBI's Providence office. Robert has already briefed her. She is expecting your call. Call her tonight. Pack a bag, take Caleb and Marisol and go. Don't tell your mother yet. I will handle your mother. You handle your family. I am not afraid for myself, Nora. I haven't been afraid for myself in a long time. I'm afraid for you, for that little girl upstairs, for everyone in that dining room tonight who laughed and ate cobbler and had no idea. Everything I've done, every paper I graded, every garden I planted, every ordinary day I built around the secret was to protect this family. That has always been enough for me. You have 24 hours, move now. All my love always, Grandma Ellie. I set the letter on the table. The kitchen was absolutely quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Upstairs, Marisol shifted in her sleep. The small, safe sounds of a house that had no idea what was sitting at its kitchen table. Caleb picked up the letter, read it again, set it down, picked up the business card. Call her, he said. It was almost 8 p.m. on a Sunday. I dialed the number. It rang once. Korea, Agent Korea, my name is Nora Voss. Elinor Voss is my grandmother. A pause, then Miss Voss, I've been expecting your call. Robert Finch briefed me earlier this week. How much has your grandmother told you? Everything, the letter, the key, the drive. She said we have 24 hours. That's approximately correct. We've had eyes on a private investigator connected to Carla Mancini Ruiz for the past 2 weeks. Yesterday, that individual was observed in the Providence area. We believe active surveillance has begun on your grandmother's residence and possibly on yours. I looked at Caleb. He was already on his feet. What do we do? Stay in your home tonight. Keep your lights and routine normal. I'm sending 2 agents to your street within the hour. You won't see them. Tomorrow at 6:30 a.m., my team comes to your door. We move you, your husband, and your daughter to a secured location. Your grandmother will be transported separately. How long? Until the threat is neutralized. We've been building a case on Carla Mancini Ruiz's financial activities for some time. Your grandmother's original handler reports if they're on that drive give us what we need to move. This ends quickly, Miss Voss. She paused. Your grandmother did something extraordinarily brave in 1971. She walked into a situation she hadn't chosen, and she made a decision that cost her 43 years of silence. That kind of courage doesn't have a name for it, but I want you to know that the people in this office understand exactly what she did. I didn't know what to say. She's a teacher, I finally said. She just noticed things. Yes, said Agent Korea, she did. I called my grandmother the moment I hung up. She answered before the first ring finished. You opened it. I opened it, Grandma. Tell me the rest. The parts you couldn't fit in 7 pages. There was a long silence, the kind that carries weight, the kind that belongs to a person setting down something they have carried for longer than I have been alive. I was 26, she said. I just needed a job. I was good with numbers and the agency sent me and I didn't ask the right questions soon enough. A breath. And then I did ask them and then I knew and then those 2 agents were standing by my car. Were you scared? Every single day for 11 years and then every day after in a different way. The fear changes shape, but it doesn't leave. Grandma, I said, you're not just a school teacher. I'm exactly a school teacher, she said firmly. I'm a school teacher who kept her eyes open and her mouth shut at the right times. That's all, that's everything. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was rough in a way I had never heard before. Take care of that baby, Nora. Take care of Caleb. I'll see you on the other side of this, and when I do, I'm going to teach Marisol how to make proper pie crust. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, sweetheart. Now stop crying and go pack your bag. We left the next morning at 6:34 a.m. in 2 black SUVs. Marisol, still half asleep, asked if we were going on an adventure. Yes, baby, I told her, a little one. Is Grandma Ellie coming? She'll meet us there. Good, she promised to teach me her card tricks. I looked at Caleb, he looked at me. The FBI moved on Carla Mancini Ruiz's associates 39 hours after we arrived at the safe house, a farmhouse in western Connecticut with a vegetable garden that my grandmother immediately assessed with a critical and professional eye. She arrived that first afternoon carrying a small overnight bag and a tin of the shortbread cookies she made every holiday. She walked in and scooped Marisol up like it was any other Sunday. Are we on an adventure, Grandma Ellie? The best kind, my grandmother said, the kind with a good ending. She looked at me over Marisol's head. Her hands were steady again. The fear was still there, somewhere behind her eyes, but it had been joined by something I had never expected to see on Elinor Vance's face. Relief. Pure, bone-deep relief. The relief of a woman who has finally, after 43 years, put something down. It's been 9 months. It's July now. Marisol is in the yard with the sprinkler. Caleb is grilling. My grandmother is sitting in the lawn chair he bought her for Mother's Day, shelling peas into a bowl in her lap, telling Marisol a story about a pelican. Carla Me Sinuz's associates were arrested. Carla herself was charged with conspiracy and obstruction. The handler reports on that USB drive, combined with the FBI's current surveillance, built a case her attorney described as airtight. She took a plea deal, 15 years. She'll be in her mid-70s when she gets out. My grandmother is 77 years old. She is sitting in my backyard, shelling peas, being Grandma Ellie, the woman who grades papers and grows tomatoes and makes shortbread, and has never once, in the memory of everyone who loves her, been anything more complicated than exactly what she appears to be. Except that underneath all of it, underneath every ordinary Tuesday and every school year and every Sunday dinner, she was also something else entirely. A woman who walked into a situation she hadn't chosen and chose anyway to do the right thing, who carried it for 43 years without complaint, without credit, without anyone knowing. The most important work, my grandmother once told me when I was 10 years old and frustrated that nobody had noticed I cleaned my room, is always the work that nobody sees. I didn't understand what she meant then. I understand now. I understand completely. If someone you love handed you an envelope and said you have 24 hours, would you open it right away or wait? Would you trust them without question or need answers first? And have you ever discovered that someone in your family was carrying a secret, a whole other life hidden not out of deception but out of love? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story reached you, share it with someone who has a quiet person in their life, a teacher, a bookkeeper, a neighbor, a grandmother, someone who might be carrying more than anyone knows. Subscribe so you never miss another story. I'll see you in the next one.